What's going on, Sports Nation? I'm your host, Kenneth Tiberius Clark, and you guys are listening to another interesting episode of the Sportsclusive Podcast. So just a few episodes ago, we had a very fun topic. We talked about embracing parity in professional sports. You know, we discussed we gave a few different examples. We talked about the chaotic NBA playoffs, which was chaotic. A eighth seeded Miami Heat team made the finals, right? We talked about the impact of NIL and the transfer portal and what that's had on collegiate sports as a whole. We talked about the expanded NBA playoffs. You know, the MLB. The MLB has a new playoff format. It's kind of similar to the NFL. And a lot of people believe that that is one of the reasons why you saw the Phillies make the World Series. And then, you know, we also talked about the World Cup. Now, I'm very new to the sport, just to throw it out there. You know, this is my first time actually following the World Cup. But from my understanding, this year was a little bit different because there was more parity. There was a little uptick in competition. And you saw Japan beat Germany and Spain. You know, South Korea, they beat Portugal. I was at work and somebody was watching that game like, oh, my God, South Korea just beat Portugal. Morocco had this Cinderella type run, you know, best they've played. I think this was the first time that they've even won a match since the late 1990s. But they finished fourth, right, in the entire tournament. And then Argentina, who ultimately won the entire thing, they won the World Cup. Shout out to Lionel Messi. They took a loss day 3 against Saudi Arabia, which caught everybody off guard. So I think after seeing some of these teams who aren't traditionally known to be great teams, be competitive, stun some of these bigger teams, really rise to the fray, I couldn't help but look home, look at us, the United States, and really ask, how are we not better? Like, how are we still not dominating in a country that has the best athletes in the world? And I will stand on this. I will fight anybody on this. The United States has the absolute best athletes in the world. How are we not better at the World Cup? Right? I think in comparison, and I guess, first of all, let me throw this quick disclaimer out. I'm not talking about the women. The women have more than done their part. They've carried their weight. They've always been one of the more competitive teams. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they've won 4 World Cups in 50 years, right? So they've done their part. Now, focusing on the men have never won the World Cup ever, and the best tournament they had was in 1930, right? I think that was their first tournament. It was in Uruguay, and they finished 3rd. And that was when the World Cup was only like 13 teams, right? So it was much smaller. Not as competitive, so the U.S. probably was able to rely on superior athleticism and things of that nature. Who knows? But that's the best they finish. And since then, they haven't finished higher than 8th. So been very disappointing, especially when you look at the athletic profile of some of these players or some of these athletes that we have here in the United States. So I've been racking my brain and I came up with a few theories as to why this is the case. Once again, I'm still no expert, but this is something that I really had to put thought to. So starting out, this is the first theory I came up with. Popularity in comparison to other sports. Well, this isn't really a theory. This is fact. So starting out, everyone knows American football is the creme de la creme. It's king in the United States. That's not arguable. And then you got baseball, basketball, the big 3, naturally. So what I did was I went on Statista, which is a pretty reliable source. And I wanted to look at the percentages of where these sports lie popularity-wise in the United States. Soccer was 6th. They were 6th at 22.1%. They were right behind boxing. Boxing's like 23.4. And they were right ahead of golf, 21.6. And this is a big difference from the big 3. I think it's kind of eerie, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, that the 3 international sports aren't as popular, right? But yeah, so, and this is a far cry from the big 3. The big 3 is all 50% and up, right? So the point is you look at the low popularity percentage, and it makes, and this is just to be real, soccer is a niche sport in America. It's not just a big powerhouse sport that demands attention from athletes and sports fans. That's just not what it is. It's a niche sport. And then I think it's a fair argument. Some people probably hate me for this. I think it's a fair argument that it's kind of a prerequisite sport. You know, outside of my own personal experiences, people I've met, you hear tons of stories of star athletes across all sports that played soccer in their youth, and it kind of helped give them some skills that they were able to apply to their sport and be dominant, right? Kobe Bryant, right? One of the greatest basketball players ever. Steve Nash. You look at baseball, you got guys like Max Kepler, Daniel Murphy, pretty solid players. They were soccer players growing up. And Dominican Sue, who, I hate to say it, you know, people forget, but Dominican Sue was one of the best defensive players in the game at the time, and he grew up playing soccer. Andrew Luck, Odell Beckham, the list goes on. So it's a lot of athletes that played soccer in their youth, and it just kind of helped them in their particular sport, but they didn't stick to soccer. So that's one of my own personal beliefs. It's a prerequisite sport. 2, lack of a true talent pipeline, both in and out of the United States. Right. Looking at other sports, it is so easy to have an understanding of where they get their talent from. You know, baseball has always been known to recruit internationally. Japan, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Mexico. Right. And that's just outside of the kids that they get here from California. You know, California, we produce great baseball players. Texas, New York. So they have their talent pipeline. They know where they're getting their guys from. It's never going to be a shortage of talent in the MLB. And then American basketball, you know, if we're looking at it from an international standpoint, when the Dream Team happened in the early 90s, you guys, that changed the game for the NBA. So now if you look at modern day NBA, there are so many dominant international players. As a matter of fact, the best players in the NBA are international players. Giannis, Joel Embiid, Luka, Jokic. Right? Just balling, but these guys are international players, and that's just because the NBA has established itself as an international presence. And then I would say they're very similar to the NFL, where if you look at inside the United States, it's a limitless pool of talent that they get. You know, I grew up in the Black community where everybody wanted to play in the NBA and everybody wanted to play in the NFL. Granted, everybody's not going to make it, but it's something that a lot of young kids aspire to do. So it's just natural. The talent produces itself for those particular sports. Soccer is in a completely different bracket because they haven't established that yet. You know, you'll find a few people that want to play soccer, but they're still establishing that strong interest in the United States where kids are like, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to develop my skills and I'm going to play professional soccer. Right? You just don't see it. And I think it's telling that if you look at the MLS in comparison to other sports, we still and I'm a big sports fan. And even if you talk to the novice sports fan, nobody can sit there and break down. You have to really be a soccer junkie to be able to break down what their talent acquisition process is like. Right? I don't know anything about the MLS draft. I never hear anything about the MLS draft. I hear more about the WNBA draft than I hear about the MLS draft. So I think that's very telling as far as their talent acquisition process, or how they get players into their league, right? And that could probably be not only the MLS, but how the men's U.S. team gets their players. Obviously, they get people from college, but it's just not as broad as some of the other sports. So lack of a true talent pipeline in and out of the U.S. 3, and this one's going to sound like a little arrogant, little snobbish because I'm American, but it's not an American sport. Simply put, Americans love American-made things. You know, I don't think that's a mystery. Americans love things that was made on American soil. And you look at the big 3. You know, basketball was invented in Massachusetts. You know, baseball in New York. Football, you know, you had Walter Camp. He wanted to make the Americanized version of rugby, and he made football somewhere in Connecticut. So these are all homegrown sports. Soccer from my understanding, and people play around with it. I've heard so many different things, but I've heard some people say it was invented in China, and I've heard people say that it was invented in Great Britain. Regardless, it's not a homegrown sport for us. So it's still trying to find its way as far as having a true presence here in the United States. And if we want to look at the MLS, right? The MLS, this is crazy. I'm older than the MLS. The MLS is 29, it's like 29, 30 years old. I just made 31. So that just shows you how long it's taking to really build up and really plant its flag here, soccer or football, right? And this is crazy. This is despite it being around for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, the first soccer match, and I just looked at it a few weeks ago, the first soccer match in America was 1866. We are in 2023. And it's been around, soccer has been around in America just as long, if not longer, than some of these other countries. I mean, let's see, France, 1897, Spain, 1890, Argentina, who just won, 1867, a year after America. It's crazy, right? And, let me go ahead and say this. It's not to say that there's still not time. Things could easily change. If we can revisit in 50 years and maybe it's changed. Maybe soccer rises and becomes the biggest sport in America, because keep seeing basketball and football start to get watered down. Who knows? Maybe soccer really rises and becomes the top sport and we get better. But that kind of remains to be seen. I think it's kind of, how can I say it, embarrassing that you have countries who started playing soccer probably a good 40 years after us. Like Morocco and Croatia, they didn't start playing soccer until the early 1900s. And they've had a lot more recent success than the United States when it comes to the World Cup play. So, it's just something to think about. Like, why is this happening to us? And I've jumped down other rabbit holes. I'll tell you another rabbit hole I've jumped down. It could be sports fatigue. If you look at America, we focus on a good 5 to 6 different sports. I have friends that are boxing fans. I have maybe 1 or 2 who are soccer fans, very few. But I have guys that are hard body baseball fans. I have friends that love swimming. I have friends. One of my coworkers is a big track and field running guy. So there are so many different focuses when it comes to sports in America. But if we were to compare it to other countries, it's just different. You guys remember, I want to say some weeks back, we did the interview with Arif Khan on the Sportsclusive Podcast from India. And he told us, hey, look, in India, we only focus on 2 sports, cricket and boxing. And boxing is new. So that just shows you how small their focus is. They could probably wind up being very dominant in boxing here within the next 20 years because they're putting so much focus towards that. And cricket, they've always been one of the bigger cricket countries in the world. Then we look at Brazil. Brazil's won the most World Cups. They have 5. Soccer is king over there, football. And then obviously jiu-jitsu, some combat sports, and they're really good. They have a really good men's volleyball team. I think women's too, but they're really good at volleyball. That's all they focus on. So that could very well be another factor, right, as to why Americans just don't love soccer in comparison to some other sports, and why the result is we just haven't been good in the World Cup. So that's just my thoughts, you guys. Once again, I'm a very novice soccer fan. I'm very new to the sport, but it was fun. The World Cup is fun, man. And you get to connect with people, here in America, melting pot, you connect with people from different countries and they're laughing, joking and joking. It's just another fun sport to add to your repertoire. But for those of you guys who are experienced, tell me what you guys think. Why isn't America better in the World Cup? And if you can give me a detailed answer, please shoot me a DM or a comment. We'll put the post up. We'll definitely put the promos up. Comment and let us know and tell us what you think. But outside of that, I hope you guys had some fun. I know I did. And I'll talk to you guys next time.